Denver is about to build a brand new stadium. Not where you'd expect, not next to the old one, not on familiar ground. On a completely different piece of land, in a completely different neighborhood, sitting on top of 150 years of buried industrial waste. And while that goes up, the stadium Denver has called home for decades gets torn down. What replaces it might matter more to everyday residents than the new stadium ever will. But before any of that can happen, the Broncos have one problem they've been sitting on for decades, and it starts with a number. The answer is a rulebook. The NFL has a long, strict hosting checklist, and Denver has been failing it for decades. If your city's average February temperature is below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, you need a roofed stadium. Denver's average is about 32.7 degrees Fahrenheit. The league says it's about protecting the fan experience, especially for corporate sponsors, and making sure a snowstorm doesn't wreck the broadcast. But Empower Field is open air, and that one design choice has kept Denver out of the Super Bowl conversation for decades. But it doesn't end there. The logistics are intense too. NFL requires hotel rooms equal to at least 35% of the stadium's capacity within an hour's drive. They even require at least 3 championship-level 18-hole golf courses and 2 top-quality bowling alleys for VIP events. Empower Field has the seats, but its older infrastructure doesn't meet today's standards, and there's a deadline looming. The Broncos' lease runs out after the 2030 season. The Walton Penner ownership group, led by Greg Penner, son-in-law of Walmart heir Rob Walton, didn't buy the team for a record $4.65 billion just to leave it in a stadium that only works part-time. They want a year-round venue, concerts in February, international soccer, major conventions, events that an open-air stadium in Denver simply cannot host. According to projections cited by Mayor Johnson's office at the time of announcement, the team currently generates around $300 million a year in economic activity for Denver. With a new year-round stadium, that number could exceed $1 billion. Independent economists have questioned how reliably stadium projects deliver on projections like these, but the directional case, more events, more visitors, more hotel nights, is hard to argue with. So with $1 billion vision on the line, the search for a new home led them to one very specific and very messy piece of land. The master plan centers on Burnham Yard, a 58-acre industrial railyard just southwest of downtown Denver. Union Pacific sold it to the state of Colorado for $50 million in 2021, with the intention of turning it into a mixed-use development. Now, the Broncos are buying it directly from the state. That's a detail that matters. It means this project needs approval from 2 separate political tracks at the same time: the state government, which controls the land sale, and the city of Denver, which controls the permits, zoning, and everything that gets built around it. Governor Polis has been in talks with the ownership group since 2022, but a governor's support and a city council's approval are 2 very different things. For decades, it was where trains were repaired. Now, it could become the center of a brand new stadium district. But this isn't just one big project, it's 2. While Burnham Yard gets rebuilt from the ground up, Empower Field at Mile High would be torn down. Yep, a fully working stadium is being demolished. Because that 80-acre site is city-owned, and right now it's mostly parking lots. The city wants to turn it into a dense neighborhood with housing instead of empty pavement. It may sound simple, but it's not. They'd need to build a stadium with a retractable roof and real grass on land that's been sitting on industrial waste for decades, and do it all in about 5 years. And that roof? That's the hardest part. Here's why. The Broncos had one non-negotiable from the start: natural grass and an outdoor feel. That ruled out a fixed dome immediately. A sealed roof means artificial turf, and it kills the open-air experience Denver fans have had for decades. So the answer is a retractable roof. When it's open, which it will be for most game days, the grass gets natural sunlight, airflow, rain. That part works fine. Problem is what this stadium is actually being built to do. The whole financial case depends on year-round events: concerts in February, Final Fours, international soccer matches, conventions. Every time that roof closes for a non-football event, the grass underneath loses its light. Do that enough times and the field breaks down, which is exactly what happens at multi-use stadiums that try to maintain natural turf without a solution. NFL players hate artificial turf. It's harder on joints and linked to more non-contact injuries, so switching to fake grass isn't an option either. That leaves two engineering paths. The first is the rolling field system at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, where a grass tray over 9,000 tons sitting on 540 wheels slides out on rails whenever the Raiders aren't playing, so it can recover in open sunlight. But that system needs a lot of clear space next to the building, and Burnham Yard is tight. The more realistic option? A system like Real Madrid's Santiago Bernabeu. There, the pitch is divided into 6 trays, each one 107 meters long and weighing around 1,500 tons. They slide horizontally out of the playing area first. Then, a hydraulic system lowers and stacks them on top of each other, up to 30 meters underground, about 100 feet, inside a climate-controlled chamber called the hypogeum. With ventilation, UV lighting and irrigation running continuously, the grass recovers below while the stadium above hosts whatever it wants. The whole operation takes about 6 hours. It's smart, high-tech, and incredibly expensive. Now add Denver's 5,280-foot altitude and the heavy snow loads that a roof at that elevation has to handle. Designing a structure that can hold that weight, open and close reliably for 12 months a year, while keeping a live grass field alive underneath, that's not just complicated, that's a serious engineering risk. But the engineering isn't even the hardest part yet. First, they have to convince the neighborhood. On February 12, 2026, the franchise held a community meeting at La Alma Recreation Center. The Broncos wanted to make one thing clear. This project won't turn your life upside down. But the timeline says otherwise, at least in terms of speed. 150 years of rail operations left petroleum, heavy metals, and chemical contamination buried across the site. And here's the thing, no serious cleanup has ever been done here. The land has been sitting in essentially the same condition it was left in when the train stopped running. That remediation doesn't happen all at once. It gets done in phases, working outward from the stadium footprint first. Contaminated soil gets excavated, treated, or capped depending on the depth and type of material found. Some of it can be treated on site, some of it gets trucked out entirely. But there's an additional layer that makes stadium construction specifically tricky: volatile organic compounds in the soil gas. Benzene, TCE, and PCE have been detected at Burnham Yard at levels high enough that engineers will need to design the building's foundation and ventilation system to actively prevent those gases from migrating into an enclosed structure. This isn't just a cleanup problem. It's a design constraint that touches every floor plan decision from the ground up. Then comes the foundation challenge. Denver sits on expansive clay soils, the kind that absorb moisture and swell, then dry out and shrink. For smaller buildings, that movement cracks foundations. For a stadium of this scale, with a retractable roof carrying heavy snow loads at 5,280 feet, engineers will use deep-drilled caisson foundations, concrete columns bored at least 20 to 30 feet into the stable bedrock below the clay layer, bypassing the unstable soils entirely. For a structure this heavy, they'll likely go deeper still. And all of this, remediation, vapor mitigation, deep foundation work, has to happen while the clock is already running on the 2031 deadline. Here's what makes it even more complicated. Vertical construction on the stadium bowl begins at the core footprint while the surrounding district land is still being cleaned. Active heavy construction running alongside active environmental cleanup on the same 58-acre site at the same time. One phase running long doesn't just delay that phase, it delays everything downstream. At Empower Field, the countdown is running in the opposite direction. Once the lease ends after the 2030 season, demolition begins on a fully functional NFL stadium. Those 80 acres transfer back to the city, and with them, the city's most watched affordable housing promise. 2 major sites, 2 completely different timelines, both moving at the same time. A project this complex, moving this fast, costs an enormous amount of money. So where is it actually coming from? The Broncos' ownership has been clear that this will be privately funded, no new taxes. But when you zoom in, it gets complicated. The city is already spending $140 million from vibrant Denver bonds on nearby road, 6th and the 8th Avenue Viaduct. Officials say those bridges needed repairs anyway. Still, the timing, right before a stadium project, raises eyebrows. Then there's a blight designation for Burnham Yard. If approved, it unlocks tax increment financing, TIF for short. Here's how it works. The city freezes the tax base at today's value, and any new tax revenue the stadium district generates above that baseline goes directly back into paying for the infrastructure that made the district possible in the first place. It's not a subsidy on paper, but it does mean that new tax dollars from the stadium stay locked inside the project for years, rather than flowing into the city's general fund. So when the team says privately funded, they're not exactly highlighting the public incentives and tax tools that help make the numbers work. And then there's the human side of it. Lincoln Park is one of Denver's oldest Chicano neighborhoods. It has Su Teatro, decades of murals, 40 years of families. It has also been dealing with slow burn gentrification for years, long before any stadium announcement. More than 300 residents showed up to the city's November open house, and displacement was the dominant concern in the room. They're pushing for a community benefits agreement with enforceable affordable housing quotas and independent oversight. Because in this neighborhood, the gap between a developer's commitment and a legal obligation has been lived experience before. If this works, there are clear winners. NFL fans get a Super Bowl. The tourism industry gets a boost. The 10th and Osage light rail station could see upgrades. Denver gets a year-round entertainment hub. But the biggest long-term impact might not be the new stadium at all. For the first time in decades, that land will be open for something new. The city hasn't committed to specific housing numbers for those 80 acres yet, just the direction. The nearest comparison is Sun Valley next door, where the Denver Housing Authority is building 2,000-plus units with half permanently affordable. If that scale transfers to the stadium footprint, it could reshape the entire west side of Denver. But right now, it's a vision, not a contract. The Broncos need the permits, the financing, and the community agreements all locked in during 2027 for this to work. If they pull it off, Denver finally joins the elite tier of Super Bowl hosts. But if it stalls, if the cleanup takes too long, or the financing gets tied up in court, then Burnham Yard stays a wasteland, and we're stuck in an aging stadium for another decade. Denver is planning to tear down one NFL stadium while building another in a completely different neighborhood at the same time. That almost never happens. So, will the new stadium be built? And will it be open by 2031? Or is that timeline too ambitious for such a massive project? Drop your prediction in the comments and subscribe for more Megabuild stories. Thanks for watching.